the role of the General Councillors in the leadership team. One of the things I've realized is that we at UISG and many places, there are formations for superior generals, for superior provincials, for major superiors, but then the councillors, they are not superiors, but they are there exercising and helping in this amazing service of authority. So we thought that would be very important as well to take you into account and try to reach out to your needs. So please, if you see that there are things that we could help you in any shape or form, let us know. Write us an email to formation at the UISG, and we will try to envisage, plan, dream other formations. So I would like to introduce Sister Kelly. I'm sure that many of you already know her, and she's a presentation of Mary's sister, and she was born in the States, even though she works very much here in Rome. She completed her studies in canon law in Canada at St. Paul's University in Ottawa, and her specialization is in religious law. And because of that, she has been able to serve religious life in many areas, working in dioceses, teaching at universities, giving retreats on religious life and the vows, providing workshops and conferences for religious and their collaborators, and also helping on consultations with individual religious and leadership teams. So I'm really pleased she's here with us. She's also served as a general council at her community, and currently she works at the Dicastery for Institutes of Consecrated Life and Societies of Apostolic Life. And she will be with us. Kelly, thank you so much for accepting this invitation. We've been together last year. It was really a beautiful reality to work with theologians, also from the perspective of canon law. And I can assure you that we are in good hands. Kelly, I give you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be with you. And Paula, you had a real inspiration for this subject, because it seems to be quite well received. When Paula wrote to me last week to give me an idea of how many people would be participating, I almost fell off my chair. As you see at the participant count right now, we're at 495. And as you wrote where you're coming from, it's very overwhelming and a little intimidating. So I'll try to do my best. And I apologize for the people in the Western Hemisphere that are up way too early to participate in this. 5, 6 in the morning, 3 in the morning, I think some may. So I'll try to keep it interesting enough to keep you awake. As we progress through our topic, remember our topic is canon law and the role of the General Councillor. So the canonical piece is very precise. We in religious life have made the role much broader than just the canonical piece. So I keep coming back to the fact that I'm a canon lawyer. So other pieces that you may add to your definition or expectations of the role of General Councillor, that's for you specifically in your congregation or institute. But that's why I've asked you to bring your documents with you. So you have your constitutions, your second book, any handbooks that you have, to look at that and see how do you define the role of General Councillor. And I don't know if everybody here is General Councillor or if there's also provincial councillors and other roles. But this is what we're going to be looking at. And there's often a parallel between the general and the provincial or intermediary levels of governance and councils. Okay. If you have questions during my presentation, you can feel free to put those questions in the chat. If it is something that is directly implicated, we're still having some connecting to translation questions coming up, so I don't want to jump in too quickly until everyone is able to follow. But if you have questions, if there's something very pressing on the immediate topic, raise your hand. But we will have some time for questions at the end, and maybe even at other points if there are questions that surface. So I would ask Paula, if you see relevant questions come up in the chat, if you could just let me know and share those questions with me, I would appreciate it.
Yes, sure, I'll do that.
Thank you.
Welcome, thank you.
Non capisco niente. Allora.
Kelly, just let me tell people, because there's
Yeah.
many. Per la traduzione, voi potete trovare in basso nel vostro schermo la parola e il simbolo interpretazione o interpretariato. Se fate clic sul mondo, avete l'elenco delle lingue che sono oggi per noi: francese, italiano, inglés, español. Si tenéis necesidad de la traducción, a las hermanas que han llegado ahora, abajo en vuestra pantalla tenéis el símbolo del mundo con la palabra interprétation ou traduction. Si vous avez besoin de la traduction pour aujourd'hui, en bas de votre écran, vous avez le symbole du monde avec la parole interprétation. Okay, so if you need translation, even though Kelly is going to speak in English, at the bottom of your screen, you have the word interpretation. Kelly, please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I will share my screen for the PowerPoint. Okay. So do let me know if it doesn't advance correctly.
Yeah, for the moment seems all correct. Thank you.
And no. That's there.
Yes.
Did it advance now?
Yes, it did.
Yes. Okay, good. So here's our basic. This is going to be the basis for our sharing this morning. According to the norm, this is Canon 627. According to the norm of the constitutions, oh, where'd you go? Superiors are to have their own council, whose assistance they must use in carrying out their function. In addition to the cases prescribed in universal law, proper law is to determine the cases which require consent or counsel to act validly. Such consent or counsel must be obtained according to the norm of Canon 127. So just to say, we're going to take this canon bit by bit. Okay? Piece by piece, according to the norm of the constitutions. So this is the first thing. This is the first place to look, is your constitutions. It is proper to you, your proper law. Every member of your institute or society is bound by your proper law. It is canonically approved. So it is canon law for your institute. Whenever there is a question, first you check your constitutions and other proper law. The sisters often will ask me, what does canon law say about? Well, the details of life, canon law does not direct. But your proper law, which is canon law for you, is the first place to look for any answers. And again, this is canonically approved, so this is what canon law says about this question. Check your constitutions first. First. Got it? Okay, according to the norm of the Constitution, superiors are to have their own council. Do you see just in the wording that it is clear that the role of the counselor is fundamentally connected to that of the superior? And I'm using the canonical terms, whether you call them team members and congregation leader, president, sister servant, however you name, I'm using the canonical terms of counselor and superior. But this is by whatever name you call them. The superior is to have his or her own counsel. There is no office of counselor apart from the superior. And the term of a counselor is directly related to the superior. This is something I've run into in the past where we give our counselors, they're named for a term, which we think is, in the General Council, it's clear because all of these members are elected at the chapter. But when we get into other areas of intermediary governance, and you could have an area leader and counselors, and the leader finishes after 3 years, but the counselor was appointed for 6 years. And so she stays on. No, the council is directly related to the superior. The superior has her counsel. And sometimes we lose sight of that and see the role of counselor as an autonomous, independent office. But canonically speaking, now, if you have something different as defined in your proper law, I'm not telling you it's wrong. If it is approved in your proper law, that's how you function. It works for you. But in the neutral area of just straight canon law, this is how the role is defined. A superior has people, specific people appointed to give counsel. Okay? They are to have their own counsel whose assistance they must use in carrying out their function. The role of the counselor is to assist the superior. And so that's all that it says in canon law. What is it? How do you define this assistance? Canonically speaking, we're going to talk about in a bit that whole consent and advice piece. But how do you use the role of assist in your proper law, in your functioning? Are you technical support and a workforce? Are you the emergency response team? Are you the cheerleaders? Are you the source of ideas and collaborators? How are you defined in your role of assistance? What does it look like for you? In your documents, how is it defined? So I invite you to take a minute and look at your documents. How do you define the role of counselor? Some will say they assist her in carrying out her ministry, collaborate in the governing of the Institute, assume responsibilities for the governing of the Institute, okay? So you have it, how is it defined? But then the next question is, how is it used? You might have, look at, okay, to maintain the unity of the Institute, that's great. Consulting, deliberation, decision-making. Fraternal communion. Life and mission. Do you see, many of you have that it's joined to the superior, that you support or are co-active in the service of the superior. With the superior to govern and animate the Institute. Okay, great. And so these are all very good definitions. Exercise authority collaboratively, participate actively in decision-making, discerning together. But what does that look like? How do you exercise that? One of the things that's been very important to me in my own research is we can't legislate how governance functions, how team works. We can't put, I mean, we can try, but to put in our constitutions that the Superior General will work collaboratively with her councillors and each one will have an equal voice. And no, we need to leave room. We say work collaboratively or exercise, share in modeling the unity of the Institute. But what does that look like? So depends upon the gifts and the capacities of each one. How will the superior use to the maximum of their capacity and their giftedness the members of her council? What are her needs and how can the council support her to bring out the best in her capacity? And how can the superior call forth the best in her council for the good of the Institute? At this point in history, we have a great example that we've been living for a very long time, that of synodality. This is the prevalent model now, but we've been using it. We've been sitting at round tables for a very long time. What does this look like in our current reality? The canon says that the counselor assists the leader in carrying out her function. 2 points. This is not optional. Superiors must have and use their counsel. But at the same time, there is only one leader. So early on, as the Code of Canon Law had been revised, 1983, questions came up after Vatican II and in the exercise in rethinking how we govern. There was a question that came to the then Congregation for Religious. Can an exclusive and collegial form of ordinary government be rightfully admitted for a total religious institute or a province, or for individual houses in such wise that the superior, if one is had, is merely an executor? And the dicastery responded that no. Superiors must possess personal authority with consideration for legitimate consultation and the limitations placed by common and particular law. So this is important, and I'll give you, it sounds hierarchical, but really, with integrity, the motivation is for the protection of the person, the individual members. To say that if there is a problem, a crisis, a need, that there is a person that can respond, and that not everything needs to go to a panel discussion for the sake of privacy, for the sake of protection of the person, that there is a person that someone can go to with an issue, and that person can decide. We'll talk about questions when it comes to consent and advice, but the superior needs to be able to sometimes hold things for herself. And so that's why there must be someone with personal authority. It's not for the exercise of authority over it's for the good of the whole, the good of individuals and the integrity of the members, okay? But so this was the response to that question, that there must be someone with personal authority. The next question came to the Pontifical Council for the Authentic Interpretation of the Code of Canon Law. When the law requires that the superior must have the consent of the council to act, does the superior have the right of voting with the others, at least to break a tie? And the answer came back as no. Now, don't panic, because many of you may have that possibility in your proper law, that if, in the case of a tie, the superior may make the deciding vote. And so you have that permission. Great. But this was the authentic interpretation. So the 2 points that we learn out of these 2 questions is that the personal authority of the superior is non-negotiable and it is not dispensable. And the second piece is the opinion of the council is likewise indispensable and cannot be mitigated by the vote of the superior. Okay? How are we doing? Okay. So we're back to our canon where we started. According to the norm of the constitutions, superiors are to have their own council whose assistance they must use in carrying out their function. Paragraph 2, in addition to the cases prescribed in universal law, proper law is to determine the cases which require consent or counsel to act validly. Such consent or counsel must be obtained according to the norm of Canon 127. Okay, so let's look at Canon 127. Don't worry, we're not going to take this canon that slow. When it is established by law that in order to place acts, a superior needs the consent or counsel of some college or group of persons, the college or group must be convoked according to the norm of Canon 166, which we'll look at, unless when it concerns seeking counsel only, particular or proper law provides otherwise. For such acts to be valid, however, it is required that the consent of an absolute majority of those present is obtained, or that the counsel of all is sought. So we're going to look at this in the next. Okay, so Canon 166 just specifies that convocation is required. So consent and counsel. How does this work? The superior presents a request, whether it originates from her or from one of the other aspects of governance, a province, an area, a zone, sends the request or recommendation and needs the permission to act. The superior presents the request, and your proper law requires that this is the answer is resolved with a deliberative vote. That is to say, consent. It is a decision-making vote. So this means that more than half of the councillors must approve it. More than half. So if I have 3 councillors, at least 2 need to say yes. If I have 4 councillors, at least 3 need to say yes. How is it worded in your proper law? With the consent of her council. If consent is required, the act of a superior who does not seek the consent of those persons or who acts contrary to the opinion of all or any of them is invalid. So if I propose a sister for profession, I'm the superior, and upon the recommendation of the director of formation, any intermediary superior, and so I present the petition the young woman has written, and she's asking to make profession. So I bring it to council. The council studies the file, and the councillors say in their vote, they do not give consent. 3 of the 4 councillors say no to this candidate. The superior cannot override them. The council can prevent a superior from acting when it comes to consent. She does not have the consent of the council. However, if 3 of the 4 say yes, but the superior knows something that she was not able to share with her councillors for some reason or another, for the reasons of privacy, But she needed to present the petition because the candidate has written, and this is the process. And so she would thank her counsel and say, I appreciate it. And with the information that you have, your answer is just. However, because of other things that I am aware of, I am unable to accept this woman for profession at this moment. So the superior can act contrary. When she has the consent, she doesn't need to use the consent, but there needs to be sound reasons. So in this model, the council can prevent a superior from acting by not granting consent, but they cannot force her to act. Now, this is very different if your wording is different of collegially, acting collegially, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes. When the superior needs the advice or counsel of her council, the superior presents the situation or the request. If there is a vote, it is consultative. And the important piece here is that each member must be heard. So the canon tells us if counsel is required, the act of a superior who does not hear those persons is invalid. Although not obliged to accept their opinion, even if it is unanimous, a superior is nonetheless not to act contrary to that opinion, especially if unanimous, without a reason which is overriding in the superior's judgment. So we look at these terms specifically and how we write them in our proper law. The superior is to seek the consent of her council. The superior does not give herself consent. If she didn't want the consent, she wouldn't present the petition. The superior does not advise herself. She doesn't give herself counsel. She hears her counselors. So it's important to recognize the fact that this body of the council is here to advise, to consent, to contribute to, that we recognize in the law as well as in our human existence that one person does not have all of the answers, right? Okay. The council, can the council ask to her knowledge? As the canon says, without reason, which is overriding in the superior's judgment, we need to allow this person has been elected, canonically elected. So her judgment is seen to be sound. If there's a real conflict, but I think it's rare that these situations happen because we do work collaboratively. We do sit at a round table and more than just the physical round table. But we also need to respect the need for some of our members for discretion, for privacy. So some have shared in the chat that in your proper law, it says that decisions are made together, that we all decisions are made collegially, and that is a very specific canonical statement in that the superior then is bound by the decision of the group. That if I have 4 councillors and the superior, all decisions are made with the vote of 5, and the one with the majority of at least 3 in support of, the superior must carry out that act. It's not to say you can't do it. You can, obviously. If that's what's in your proper law, that's how you function. And you need a tremendous level of trust and collaboration and good formation and dialogue and clarity and honesty and all of these things. It could, I had a canon law professor who says, do what you want, but know what you do. Okay, to have collegial votes for anything of consent takes a lot of work, of mutuality, of trust, as I said, and it could be paralyzing. If there is a conflict among the group, the council, things can be brought to a screeching halt to stop things moving forward if every vote is collegial. So yes, absolutely. If this is how you function and it's working for you, alleluia. And what a gift and a model for the church that you present. Okay, this is a good thing. But just be aware of the work that is necessary to ensure that it doesn't become a block. Okay, there's lots of stuff popping up in the chat. Is there any question?
Yes, Kelly, thank you so much. There's a couple of questions. I can read them aloud to you and then you decide. So one of the question is if a councillor can make part of the General Council for more than 12 consecutive years without interruption. Then the second question, can I continue or would you like to answer? Yeah.
Well, that one's easy. What does your proper law say?
Okay.
There's nothing in canon law that gives the term, as long as it is defined.
Okay, and if the canon law, and if your proper law doesn't say anything, like in my community, for instance, so it can be.
It doesn't say anything?
About the years
how many
the
terms of office?
Yes, for the councillor.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay, then the next question. So thank you for the answer. So the next question says, the first councillor, so the Vicar General, I don't know if that's the name in English, what is her role in the presence and in the absence of the general leader?
What does your proper law say?
Okay.
Usually it says that usually it says that the vicar replaces the superior when she's incapacitated. And if the incapacitation is more permanent, that she is no longer capable of continuing as superior general, then the assistant or the number 2 there, the vicar, will call a general chapter within so much time. Or if there is less than so many months or of the mandate remaining, then she just carries on till the chapter already foreseen. So it depends. What does your proper law say? The role is defined there.
What I am getting from some of the questions, one of the sisters says, what about when our proper law doesn't say much? It seems that probably there are many proper laws that don't explain all these things apart from the canon law. So what would you advise in those situations?
Well, so what we're talking about here today is what the universal law says. So these are the guidelines, but how you function is dependent upon who's at the table, who is the superior, who are the counselors, and you have this opportunity to come together and say, how do we want to do this? Here's what our proper law says is the role of the leader, the unity of the institute, the care and promotion of the charism, the care of the members, okay? The basic elements of who we are and this ministry of authority and governance. So how do we do this? And what are the things that we need to do? And what are the things that we can involve others, members of the Institute? So the things, if there's not a lot in the proper law, only those things that require the consent or advice of the council are those that need to be done by the council. Anything else can be done by the council or can be shared in the responsibilities of others outside the council. So, you know, like I said, we cannot legislate team. We've tried in the past, we've said, you know, one counselor will be responsible for the apostolate, one counselor will be responsible for community life, one counselor will be responsible for, and we try to break up our life into these pieces. One counselor is responsible for formation, but our life is unified. And so for some times, for some groups, this works and is very effective. For others, it doesn't bring out the best in those who are sitting at the table. So how do we want to work? How do we want to help the congregation, the institute, the growth of the charism, our patrimony of who we are, to be best animated by our sisters throughout the world?
Another question on that line, Kelly, is can the proper law go against or differ with the universal law?
Yes, surprisingly. Because if your constitutions have been approved by the Holy See, it is valid. You have that right. It is canonically valid. And so this, you go first. Because remember, this canon 127 is in the general norms of the Code of Canon Law. It is not in the part on religious life. It's any when it is established to place acts, the superior needs the consent or counsel of some college or group of persons. Okay, and this is superior in the generic term. It could be a bishop, it could be a vicar general, it could be, you know, could be a pastor in the parish. Whatever the group is, whatever the superior is, and whatever college or group of persons, These are the general guidelines of consent and counsel. We apply them very fundamentally in our role of governance in religious institutes. So, but as I said early on, the first place you look for your answers is in your proper law. And if your documents are well approved, then that is what you follow. My favorite example of the difference between the universal law and proper law is there was a sister who knew just enough canon law to be dangerous. And she said, when we receive gifts, we are to honor the will of the donor. That's canon law, that we must honor the will of the donor. And so my brother has given me money. And he said, this is for you. And so to honor the will of the donor, I have to keep it, this money that he has given me. I said, yes, sister, that's true in universal law, but in your constitutions, it says that I may not receive any gift that cannot be given to the institute. By my vow of poverty in this congregation, it overrides the universal law because I have committed to this specifically. So when it comes to, there's a discrepancy between the universal law and your proper law takes priority because you have vowed to live according to the constitutions of your institute, which may call you to renounce some of the rights you would have in the universal law, like this keeping of the money my brother gave me. Or it might give you more freedom in the voting capacities that we've been talking about.
Kelly, I would like to ask you another question and then I allow you to continue with what you have prepared, because many questions come in the wake of what you said about the consensus. So the superior needs to ask for consent, but then you said she can be prevented from acting, but she doesn't have to act on what she asked for consent for. Can you develop that a little bit more? Because the sisters are asking many questions along that line as well, when you said that she cannot vote to untie the tie. So
right.
On those lines, please.
Okay, let's talk for, let me see, how many slides do I have left? I can't see how many. I think I have like 3 slides left.
Okay.
So let me just do those.
Okay.
And then I'll close the PowerPoint and we can talk.
Okay. I think it's a good thing. Thank you very much.
Okay. So now the last piece of the canon, the 3rd paragraph, says that all whose consent or counsel is required are obliged to offer their opinion sincerely, and if the gravity of the affair requires it, to observe secrecy diligently. Moreover, the superior can insist upon this obligation. This is important as part of the role of the counselor. Honesty and discretion. Now, 2 things I love about this. How great is this, that your job as counselor is to give your opinion? You know, how often you say, well, if anyone asked my opinion, this is what I would. This is your job, is to give your opinion. What a great job that is. But at the same time, your goal is not an agenda. It's not your agenda. You are there. You have been elected or appointed for the common good. when in Canon 626, it talks about appointing or electing superiors, that we have nothing but God and the good of the Institute before our eyes. And so that is our call in this ministry, as we discerned the things of the Institute. Can we have nothing but God and the good of the Institute before our eyes? As a general councillor, unless it's otherwise defined in your constitutions, you are there for the whole institute or society, not your place of origin or the areas you have responsibility for, or for those I can't even read my own writing. You are to seek the good of the whole. This is important. So to do that, you must be well informed. I cannot give my opinion on that which I don't know. And you must speak your truth, because that is your job, to give your opinion. You were called forth either by the general chapter or by superiors through appointment. You were called because of who you are and the gifts that you bring as a member of the Institute. Your goal, your desire is to seek the common good. So I speak my truth, considering what I have heard, what I know of the situation from my perspective. This is how I respond. And then we listen together. That whole thing of synodality that has been built up. We've done it for generations, okay? But we listen to one another. And in the end, the decision is not ours, personally. And so my call is to let go and support the decision of the group. And then finally, and most importantly, to always be discreet. No one who is not at that table should know who was in favor, who agreed, who disagreed, what's happening, where the tensions are. No one should know that outside of that room. Even if I don't agree with the decision that's being carried out, if I spoke my truth, then outside that room, this is our decision, okay? I've heard of situations where councillors are going back to the province where an issue has been brought forth and telling them who's in favor of what and where the tensions are, and it breaks my heart. That is not the role of the councillor. Okay? So this is the crux of it. To make intelligent decisions or give sound advice, the councillor must be well informed. And then to speak what I hear, what I see, what has surfaced in prayer for the common good. Not what I like, not what I want, not what I think is best, not about me, but about the whole. Many of you put that you have the unity of the congregation as a primary task of your job. It begins at the table. And then to support the decisions that are taken. And to be discreet. Okay? Important. So in the universal law, there are 12 references to the council, 12 references to the council of the 23. I did a search, find the word of council. There are 23 references in the area of consecrated life that refer to the council. And 12 of those have to do with separation, exclaustration, indult departure, or dismissal. The others, here we have alienation, the superior with the consent of the council, the transfer, suppression, or erection of a novitiate, okay, making novitiate in another house of the institute, admission to profession, absences, transfer to another institute. Okay, so these are, and it's always in terms of with the consent of their councils. So the language of what does it say in your proper law? Here are some examples from within the universal law. After having heard the council. Okay, that's advice. When it says the superior with the council decides, I find that to be a bit nebulous. Is that consent? Is that advice? Is that collegiality? There's only one canon that refers to the obligation for a collegial vote, which is in the case of dismissal. The supreme moderator with the council is to proceed collegially. In other words, in this case, the superior must carry out the decision of the group. Okay, so that's it for the slides. I'll stop sharing and we'll chat. So tell me.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I think that you've opened worlds. Now all our brains and questions are flowing. So I will repeat the question that I think it's a general question. So you spoke about consent, you spoke about counsel. I think another word for translation, it's the deliberation, the deliberative act. So the question is, when the Superior General asks for the consent, then you said that she can decide not to act upon that, not to do what the consent. If she has to do it, she has to do it according to the consent, but she can choose not to do it. So can you explain a little bit more that reality? Because I think that was probably a novelty for many, and it's important to clarify. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it's good. Think of consent. I mean, not really, but it's kind of a permission. It's a license to act. So I just received, there's always the case of somebody who asks to leave the institute. And so we do all the paperwork and they ask, and the indult of departure comes back from the Holy See. It is not effective until notification has been accepted. So we get the document, we come to the sister and we say, sister, here is your indult of departure. And she says, you know what? I changed my mind. I don't want to leave. She does not have to accept the permission. As long as she is willing to stay and live the normal life of the institute, she can refuse the permission. So, okay, the alienation of property, or let's something of historic or artistic value. The superior comes to the council and says, because you think she wants this permission, she's presenting the petition to her council. And so she says, we need to sell or donate the stained glass windows from the mother house. And so here's the scenario, and we get that the it's a good idea. We need to do this. They're going to go into a parish church. And so, yes, the council gives consent. The superior may then proceed with the act that she proposed. But what if, as soon as she hears that consent from her council, she finds out that that parish is going to be suppressed? That church will no longer be used as a place of worship. So she does not need to use that consent. We can say that it's because the situation changed, but she has that permission to act, but she may, with overriding reason, decide not to act. Now, if her council said, no, you do not have the consent to alienate these stained glass windows to anyone, never mind the diocese or the parish, and she does it anyway, it's invalid. Now, isn't that nice to say it's invalid? It's done, right? But because if it stays within an ecclesiastical form, a place, the bishop shouldn't, or the pastor shouldn't accept them without evidence of the consent. Should. They presume, they trust us, right? So it's just a fine line. But if in your proper law, it says that these are decisions, it doesn't say with the consent of council, but it says collegially, then all the members vote equally. Even the superior, that's the whole model of collegial, that everyone votes together and the superior is bound to carry out the decision made. So she cannot override in that situation. So it's to look very closely at the language of your document. And in that particular case, so you probably have a list somewhere, either under the rights and obligations of the superior or somewhere in your definitions, or what are those things that the superior needs the consent of her council, and what are those things that she needs to consult or have the advice of her council. And if there are decisions to be made collegially, that should also be defined and clarified. Is that helpful?
Thank you, Kelly. I think it is helpful. So we have collegiality in one way, we have consent, we have asking the council. So I think the sisters need as well to see the language in their constitutions. So the question that follows up from this is, what is the proper evidence that their decision followed the right process? So how can the council as well make sure that it is following the right process?
The list of tasks that require, or those decisions that require consent or council or collegiality should be in your documents. And so it's for everybody to know. Part of your responsibility is to know what things you are acting on. And to help, because the whole principle of a council is we recognize that not one person can't have all of the knowledge or insight. And this is why the council must be used to hear the different voices and the different perspectives. But the task remains. So this is defined somewhere in your proper law, those things that are to be decided collegially, those things that are to be given acted upon only with consent, and those things for which the advice must be sought. And so at one point, I remember reading the minutes of a meeting, and the secretary had written it wasn't precise, whatever it was. I don't remember what it was. The superior with her council can be done. We'll do this. And I went to the secretary for the corrections and I said, this was a consent question. So you need to reword it as, with the consent of her council, the superior will, give this permission. So it's just to be aware of those little things.
Kelly, thank you. Other questions go with the knowledge. You said the councillors need to be well informed. So I'm just going to share 2 or 3 questions. One is, what is to be well informed? The other one is, you said that sometimes the Superior General has knowledge that she cannot share. So the question is, can the councillors ask for that knowledge? Or on the other way around, if the councillors have knowledge, do they have to share it with the Superior General?
Always delicate. If somebody a member has something and they're not free to discuss with the Superior General, but one of the councillors is willing to discuss, then if she is asked not to reveal the content, then she needs to honor that. I mean, it's a matter of integrity and discretion, but she needs to make the superior and or the other councillors aware that there is an overriding issue here and that this person is not free to do whatever the request is. If the Superior General herself has this knowledge and feels she can't share it, I mean, we can't force discrete information to the table, because it's the whole point of having somebody in authority that our members can go to with discretion. And so it just takes that work of trust among us, that if she believes that this information that is so delicate that she can't share it with us is overriding over what the rest of the conversation has been, then we need to trust her. If a councillor has that information that she cannot share, even with the Superior General, because that's why she was entrusted with this information, but says it's a matter of conscience, and because of what she knows, she believes that this is not the best decision, or this is the best decision, whatever the direction is. Do we trust her? If you believe that you have the discretion among you and you would feel better, or if you've told the person who has confided in you, I will need to share this with the superior or with the council, and they give you that permission, that's a whole other story. And so do you have the trust of your members that you will be discreet and it won't become general knowledge because it's been shared at the table? So it's always to act in the best way possible for the situation.
Yes, and what you're saying about trust, it's important, and seeking the common good. Thank you. Another question that I think it's in our minds, and as well since COVID hit, because we have done lots of things remotely as we're doing this one. So the question goes for the way the votations are done. So can council meetings be done remotely with votations? That's one. And then when you speak about, when you gave the example about half of the votes, Is it the whole council or is it the present people? So if the council is 5 people and there are only 4 present, when you say the majority, what does that mean? So the remote question and the number of votes, please.
So the first answer is, what does your proper law say? If it says nothing about remote meetings, but this is a practice that you have begun or have used, you know, how do you define presence? Since we've been able to do conference calls, not just Zoom and Skype and the kind of video conferencing, but earlier on when we could do conference calls, the guidelines were pretty much internally. I'm not saying from the Holy See, because they were not aware of these things. In reality, the rule of thumb was that you could hear everyone and know who was speaking. So that, because if we're discerning something together, we need this capacity to interact. When it comes to votes, there are some things that you vote anonymously, right? It's secret votes. You can't do secret votes on Zoom. You can't do, and so you give up an aspect of the discretion if you decide to do this online. Some congregations are beginning to make rules or agreements of practice at this point, because we are more mobile, and perhaps the task of within your tasks on General Council are to travel quite a bit and visit the provinces or areas of the congregation and spend significant time in various places to know the situations well. So you would want to have meetings even while people are away, and now we have this possibility. Some groups are saying advice, meetings of advice. So to keep things moving, regular meetings can happen and everybody is within reach. So we can do virtual meetings, but not for things that require consent. Those will be done only in person. Okay. The value of meeting in person for those things of consent is the secret ballot. And so is it for everybody, or what does your proper law state for a quorum? What is a quorum? How do you define, what do you need for decision making? Consent or collegiality? What is the minimum? And then you decide if it is something that cannot wait. When are enough of you there? And then consent, it is of those present, the majority of those present. So if you have 5 members of the council and consent would be 3, more than half, but only 4 members are present, consent would still be 3 of the 4 instead of 3 of the 5. Okay. 2 and 2 is not consent unless you have that possibility in your proper law that the superior can break the tie. I see a question that we can't be sure that somebody else isn't in the room when we're on virtual meetings. And again, we come back to trust. Do I understand the discretion necessary in this role, in this ministry?
On those lines, Kelly, the questions continue to flow, saying that there are ways of making manifest your vote in a secret way, even online, being it writing straight to the Superior General, being it
But that's
through
not
Zoom.
secret. The whole point of the secret ballot is that nobody's name is associated with the vote.
Okay. So the thing is to create a secret reality.
And again, the universal law doesn't speak of it. The Code of Canon Law was promulgated in 1983. This was beyond the thoughts of possibilities. This is not regulated in the universal law. But the parameters of the ministry that you are then responsible for, how do you understand your responsibility and want to carry this out in the way that you can for the good of the whole, for the good of the Institute, and with the appropriate integrity of carrying out this ministry. It's not to find out how we can do this, but the question is, why do we want to? Why do we value the need to do this? Okay? Just because means are available doesn't mean that we need to use them. What is the value in doing this? Is it so that my councillors can be more widespread and take on more responsibilities and less concerned with the guidance of the whole? Because, you know, more and more we're asking, well, can general councillors be leaders of areas? You know, can my general councillor be the provincial in the United States at the same time? The
Actually,
question isn't.
There's one of the questions that just came up.
Okay.
Yes, please go.
It's not to say, can we do this? It's to say, do we want to do this? And to understand well, what is the role of the General Council? Is it to represent the different places of the congregation? Or is it to look with a global vision at the whole? So if we're saying that area leaders can be general councillors or general councillors can be area leaders, however you want to make that relationship, it's to clearly define what the expectations are. To clearly define, yes, sister takes care of the canonical necessities or the day-to-day governance of this area. But when she comes to the table of General Council, she is here for the whole Institute, not to represent the needs of this area. What are our values is always the question. What do we value and how do we wish to bring that to fruition through the ministry that we carry out?
Kelly, thank you. There is still a lot of questions on this voting. If it has to be secret, if it can be done by a show of hands, if there are programs that can allow secret voting. So if you can and dwell on that. And then there's another question on the same line. If you can give an example of a secret voting matter on a council.
Again, it's in reference to your proper law. There are some things that say will be done by secret vote. If you don't have anything and you never exercise a secret vote, then you decide what constitutes presence. But you know well, you've experienced it personally, I'm sure, that Zoom meetings, online meetings, our level of engagement is different than when we're sitting in a room together, right? Because we multitask. We are very capable people, and we multitask. And we mute ourselves, and we're answering the phone, and somebody's coming in to check on something, or we're checking our messages, or playing solitaire. I don't know. You know, we multitask. And so my level of engagement may differ. And when we're in a room together, we have that sense of the Spirit among us. We intuit, we feel the comfort or discomfort of our colleagues, of our sisters. And so continuously, the Holy See, and as somebody is mentioning, the guidelines that were given by the dicastery, the value, the priority is always for physical presence, because we know it's different. We have the means to do other things, but do we value presence, physical presence? Is it important for us? So the question of secret votes, again, do we, even at chapters, we say, do we need to do a vote on this, or can we hold up our little cards of green and red? A level of trust. Can we do this online? It's not so much the question of can we or how do we, but to come back to the values. What is our first priority? Is this merely a business meeting that we're just going to run through the business of the Institute very professionally and very remotely? Or do we recognize that our business is about persons and ministry and the discerning of God in our life and the calls for the future? Is it to say we can't do that remotely? No. But how do we do that the best we can? What is our call? And to not get caught up in the how and the what and the can we, but why do we do what we do? Why are we here? Why have we been called, elected, appointed? For what purpose? For the unity, to share in promoting the unity of the congregation, great, but we're never together. What does it look like? I'm very strong on that it's really not about the business, but the why. Okay? What are our values, and how do we wish to live coherently with those values as much as possible? It's not to say there aren't moments that require exceptions, but that they're made with intentionality.
Thank you, Kelly. I think you're very, very clear. I will invite the sisters, if they want to speak as well, to ask the questions live. I think that will be possible.
Can we take a couple minutes?
And we can take a couple of minutes for the translators as well. So
yeah.
Shall we have 5 minutes, 10 minutes of break? Let's do 10 minutes, because I think there's a lot as well to digest and to chat among yourselves. So we'll be back in 10 minutes. I still have 1 or 2 questions, but I will invite the sisters afterwards if anyone would like to ask questions live. Yes. So please remain online, just switch off your mic and your video, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we resume. I hope the translators were able to rest a little bit, and so did you, Kelly. I'm aware that there are many questions. I think it's a theme that touches everyone. So I invite the sisters, if they want to ask questions live, we can do that as well. I think you have the permission to unmute yourselves or to raise your hand first, and then we will give you the word. So before we go into that, some questions here. It's about the councils. Who can make part of the councils? Can people that don't belong to the community be part of the council? Can it be shared by a non-member, a hired or a paid person? Also, another question is there a hierarchy within the council? And again, the same question, because normally the constitutions, the proper constitutions say that the Superior General is part of the council. So again, does she have to vote, not to vote? The same questions. But I think because sometimes we haven't heard much of these in the past, Kelly, if you can go over it again. Thank you.
That last piece, it's always about how are things worded in your proper law. So you can say that, you know, the General Council is made up of the Superior and Councillors. But then when it comes to decisions, or where it says consent or advice in that list of tasks, how is it articulated? The Superior with the consent of the council or the councillors, because if she's a member of the council or the team or however it's worded, or collegially with, or in consensus. Now, somebody asked about the term consensus, and that's a whole other thing, because consensus is a distinct process where I articulate and we, you know, I speak my truth and we're all looking for the good of the whole. And I might say, I don't agree, but with the decision, but I see that it is the best decision right now of the group for the whole, for the common good. And so that's consensus. We hope that we arrive at consensus, but unless it's articulated specifically in our proper law of how that happens, or that it is to happen, we don't necessarily, we function synodally. And yet at the same time in the church, we are striving to understand what that means. We desire to listen well to one another. We desire to have that inner freedom to speak our truth. How do we live that and put it into practice for the good of the whole? And Paula, I lost some of the earlier parts of your question.
So is there a hierarchy within the councillors? And can people that don't belong to the congregation be part of the council? Can we hire people to do that labor?
Now, see, that's an important question, to do that labor. What is the labor? Because remember, consent and advice are the only canonically defined roles of councillors. So if the work that is being done by councillors is other than that, unless it is specifically said in your constitutions that one of the general councillors has the responsibility for such and such a work, it can be done by anybody. We've always done it by a council, but it's not in the law. If it's not in the law, it can be done by somebody else, another member or a hired position, always with oversight of the superior, either directly or through another. Somebody not a member of the congregation on the council. We can in this understanding that we don't have all the information or all the knowledge. We are not omnipotent. We can always seek the advice of others. We can call in whoever we want to give advice, but it doesn't make them members of the council. Remember that we are here for the Institute. We can receive advice, but do we want somebody who is not a lifetime member making decisions for us? That's the question. We can seek advice from anybody and bring them in and have them speak to us. But to make them decision makers when they do not bear the responsibility of the decision or have to live with the effects of the decision is a whole other thing. And so it's to say to do this with great care. If you're going to do what you want, but know what you do.
Thank you, Kelly. So I'll give the voice, the space to Suor Tiziana. Se puoi, per favore, aprire il...
So, Sister Tiziana, if you want, you can open your microphone. So, I'm sorry for my voice. I've been ill lately. I would like to thank Sister Kelly because she was very clear and she opened, she gave me many insights and also arose in me many questions because the topic is really wide. I would like to go back to the question of the deliberative vote and on the role of councillors. Because it is true that a pandemic brought us to use these online platforms and it wouldn't have been possible to work otherwise. But it is also true that something that I have been living also with other congregations, that many small congregations have their councillors in different regions, even in different countries. And so I'm now one of the people deeply convinced that an in-person council is the optimum. And every time we can have our council in presence, we should do that. However, it is not always possible. And so if we need to choose between not doing that or doing that with a platform, I would say, well, let's use a platform. But when we talk about balloting and having a secret ballot, most surely these platforms give this opportunity in which the ballot is secret because we can't see those who vote, but the most important thing is that everyone votes all together. Instead, the Superior General may see the number of the people voting and see who is in favor and who is against. I read, however, that the dicastery doesn't accept this perspective. However, the dicastery is probably some steps behind compared to the concrete problems that we have been facing, that the need of making choices and even implementing some guidelines. Our life has been facing us with specific solutions. And so I would say, well, you, Sister Kelly, but even those Canon lawyers that deeply know these problems, could you enlighten the dicastery, saying, well, we are now in 2033, there are many congregations living in this difficult context, and even if they want, they are not able to have their councils in presence. And so what shall we do? So this is a very important and it is a very also delicate point because it is something that we live on a daily basis. And feeling feeling the fact that we are working in an illegal way, it is not really true. We need to find a way to solve this problem in our congregations. I hope I made myself clear with my question.
Thank you. Yeah. With Sister Simona now at the dicastery as the secretary prefect, and from her experience, I think that will bring us to a different place at the dicastery. And the experience, the very profound experience that both she and Cardinal Brasdavis had as participants at the synod. It is their hope to bring this model into the life of the dicastery. I don't know how they are going to do that, but I know that that is one of their profound desires. So that might bring means of sharing among the officials to a different way, that we could share the information, the needs, and the desires of institutes. But I bring it back to you that you decide how you need to function for the good of the whole. Some congregations say, all right, after election, when a new group takes office, they will spend 3 months living together and getting to know each other and building that relationship of trust and mutual understanding, so that when they are far spread, they have a relationship, and that they will do all that they can to meet in presence how many times a year, so that they have the room to function and still meet, caring for their responsibilities outside of being together, but that they value coming together on occasion, to keep that relationship strong and to share, because we know that there's more information that happens in between meetings, as we're sitting at a meal together, as we're chatting before or after a meal. We learn more about each other, and we learn more about the situations that we have witnessed and been a part of. So it's a matter of, how do you need to do what is best for your institute? And again, it's not so much how much can we do, but how can we do the best for our members, to model our values for our members, because every single one of our sisters and brothers is living in a challenging situation to balance community life and apostolate, to balance and unify charism and mission. So how can we, called to this service, help to model the work required to find a good and healthy balance for the good of the whole? It's not the work that's important. It's the how and the why of the work. Anybody can do the job, but how we do it, called forth by our charism, is what makes the difference. I don't want to lose sight of the question of a hierarchy within the council. This is, what does your proper law say? Okay. No, there are councillors. You have the superior and you have councillors. You have one who is the vicar or the assistant or the first councillor. I know some congregations, they name all of their counselors as assistant superior general. So they're all assistants. But when it comes to say, we may it never happen, but say the superior general and the one appointed as the vicar or the first assistant or however you term it are in an accident and are incapacitated, cannot act. It is the canonical hierarchy, unless it's defined otherwise in your proper law, will be by election. So the order of election, the first one elected will be the next one to step in to move things forward. Okay. And then you go there. So it's by order of election. But when it comes to voice at the table, all equal. Okay. I hope that answers the question of hierarchy.
Thank you, certainly does. Thank you very much. So I'll give the possibility of intervening to Suor Nerina della Curia Generale.
Buongiorno.
Good morning. Good morning. Back again concerning voting online, because we are also a general council. We all live here in the General Curia, but we travel a lot. We now have Superior General and another Councillor in visitation to the communities of East Africa, and they will be back in 3 months. And in the meantime, what shall we do? But that's fine. So the consent is clear, deliberative voting is clear, we can do that, but unless the group that is here with the consent of the Superior General may work with the General Vicar and vote and have a ballot, and this may be valid. And when we talk about a deliberative vote, could we have online balloting? Is it considered as valid, or can we use the same system? So again, those who are here in place and can meet in presence will just record the absence of the others and just vote. Is it possible at the canon level? And we have also another question, and I wrote it in the chat, but it probably got lost. We have our constitution undergoing some renovation works, and we read, however, that the General Council is made up of the General, Superior, and 4 councillors. And so how can we have our ballot when in the cases in which the Superior General doesn't vote? Shall we just accept the vote as valid if the vote is even, or shall the superior intervene anyway, or should we take advantage of the occasion of the renovation of the Constitution to add specific and more valid norms? What would you advise us to do? Thank you.
Okay, again, it's for how you define the General Council, but it's how, when you ask for the vote, what does it say? That the superior seeks the consent of her council or the advice of her council? If that is separated, or does it say the superior with her council, or just the General Council decides? If that's the case, and it has been your practice that they all vote, and the superior has to then implement the decision of the group, if that is how you function, then you continue to function that way. You follow your proper law.
Veramente il nostro diritto proprio dice semplicemente
Well, our proper law just says that the Superior General needs to ask for the consensus of the General Council. So shall she vote or not? We also read there is a norm from 1986 saying that, a decree saying that the superior general or the major superior is not part of the General Council, never part of it, unless there is the principle of collegiality. But in the case of the General Council of an institute in itself, the supreme moderator is not part of the council. So we said, okay, we made big mistakes from the very beginning, actually, and nobody told us anything.
Yeah, it's one of those things that if you got the approval of it, it's approved. So the Superior General, but if your proper law says the Superior General with the consensus of the council, then she needs the consent of her councillors. If it does not say that she can break a tie, then she cannot break a tie. So that's pretty much, that's it. Yeah. Okay. What does it say? That's all the question is. What does it say in your proper law? And one of my favorite points in canon law, where there is doubt, there is freedom. So if it's not clear, then you do what you need to do. Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly. That's a very good rule. When there's doubt, there's freedom. But again, when there's doubt, we need to look for information and knowledge. That's what we're trying to do here. I think we need to start wrapping up, and I would like to finish with with a couple of things. I will give you the word at the end so that you can tell us what we're going to do tomorrow, please. And also, I'd like to try to translate the PowerPoints. Very many sisters have asked us if the PowerPoint is in other languages. We can try to do that, if that's all right with you.
It's just the canons, and they can find the canons easily.
So that's why it's easier to translate. So the last question, which is normally what often happens, what if the council continuously blocks the decisions of the Superior General that they are against? What if the Superior General has a council within the council? So what to do in those cases when the division in the council paralyzes the leader, and also when some councillor doesn't do her tasks, or it's not helpful even after dialoguing with her. So all these conflicts that often happen within the decision making and all the processes of the council. Thank you, Kelly.
If there's a way that I can get a copy of the chat questions so that I can try to integrate them into tomorrow's presentation.
Of course.
It might be helpful. So if we can do that. The paralyzing of the council and that kind of thing, or conflict within the council, we'll look at that tomorrow, because that's not a simple answer, right? So I think we're at our last minute. So I think what I'll do is I'll look at the questions that are in the chat. If Sister Tiziana can put her question in the chat so that I can be sure to have it. Florence?
Kelly, you can save the chat on your computer. Just now, you go in the chat, you have three dots.
Yeah, save chat, I see it.
And so you have it. So all of us, we can save the chat. If we want to keep all the questions that we want to read again, you can save on your computer. You keep it on your computer. It will be perfect. In the document Zoom, and you will find it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Florence. So tomorrow, the first thing that we'll look at is those points of change that Pope Francis has made for things that affect our life. Just a very general look at those few points. And then we'll come back to your questions. So I will give you most of the time tomorrow, I think. So if you can gather your questions and really think, and if you need to reflect again on what we've shared today, and what are those questions? Remember, I'm a canonist, okay? I'm not a social worker. I am not a peacemaker. I am not a psychologist. I'm a canonist. And so what are the canonical pieces that we need to put together to be effective in our ministry for the good of our institutes? Okay, so we'll do that. And tomorrow I will be with you from the airport.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Kelly. That's really kind, and within this religious life comings and goings. I think the chat witnesses the usefulness and the gratefulness of the sisters of this workshop. I'm really pleased because it's something that we really thought for a while. We had Canon Law for Superior Generals last month. Now we're having this today and tomorrow with you. So we also want to help the General Councillors. Please be with us tomorrow. I'm sure that many other questions will come up. And I think the sentence I heard the most today is, what does your proper law say? So I really encourage you to read it. Sometimes in my community, I see that we have constitutions, we have our proper law, we have the Ratio Formaciones, we have lots of documents, but then we don't read them. And sometimes I see things being done and I say, but is that what it's written on our proper law? So we really need to read it, and words are important, and as well to interpret, to reflect, to pray, to share. And if change needs to be made as well, to seek advice, to seek interpretation, not to live in doubt, to live in freedom also. But I really think it's important that this formation doesn't stay here. I can see many sisters are with their communities together. So I invite you to foster this conversation among yourselves. We will send you, if Kelly allows, the PowerPoint in the different languages so that you can continue looking at them. As Kelly said, they are the canons, and you can find them online at the Vatican site and in other places. And please be with us tomorrow at the same time. And thank you so much. Thank you, Kelly. Safe journey tomorrow. We'll meet you again. And I invite everyone to unmute, and we can just say goodbyes and hellos. And
Thank you.
with our gratefulness.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much.
Cheers.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Bye.
For the man.
Bye.
I hope you're going in Canada.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Espacio, gracias.
Regula.
Gracias.